I started out in print in Washington, D.C., and I was writing for a newsletter. Somebody at the Washington Post called me into his office, and he said, "We will never hire you from a newsletter. We're snobs. We don't care how many stories you break. You've got to quit your job, go back to school, or go overseas." Now, I ended up doing both. I got a master's in Middle East Studies, and thanks to Wellesley, I went to Egypt. Before going to Cairo, my mom said to me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Same thing she said before I quit my DC newsletter job. And I quote her, "When will you ever get a job that pays you $30,000 a year again?" Thanks, Mom. Parents out there, don't do that. Now is the time we're supposed to be broke. So, from Egypt, I went to London, and as the newspapers started cutting back, I moved over to radio. Now, radio, I was terrified of doing radio. It wasn't my first choice. But I got better at it, and then I ended up at the front seat of history. I was there when Milosevic gave himself up. I was in Tora Bora as Osama bin Laden disappeared in a puff of smoke off the back of the mountain. Every time I'd end up in a hot zone, though, I'd look left or right, and I'd see these amazing television news teams. And there were these people sharing the burden of working in those hell zones. And they also had resources. My translator, I could afford a $50 a day translator. Theirs was a lot better. So I got broken English, and they got the New York Times. I wanted that. Again, somebody gave me a chance, took the long shot, and I ended up with a front row seat of post-invasion Baghdad in 2003. Initially, the euphoria in the States over the apparent ease of victory meant it was very hard to put anything critical on the air. Then, as the insurgency emerged and grew and car bombs started hitting one neighborhood after another, I'd go in the middle of a neighborhood and stand next to a screaming father in literally pools of blood. And he would be shouting at our cameras, "You were supposed to bring us security," with his dying child there that he was rushing to the hospital. It became harder and harder to go out the door. Every time I weighed a story choice, I'd say, this is life or death. One of my cameramen, Paul Douglas, put it best. He said, "Don't risk my life unless we're going to make air." In a horrible way, I kept that promise. Memorial Day 2006. We planned to spend a few hours with the 4th Infantry Division Patrol and a captain named Alex Funkhauser. Paul and our sound man, James Brolin, and I were going on what we thought would be a short, safe shoot in a safe neighborhood. But for our first stop, Funkhauser wanted to talk to some Iraqis on a street where a roadside bomb had gone off the day before. He said, they know who operates in their neighborhoods. Some insurgent cell has moved in there. They'll be able to tell me who it is, where they are. So that's how we ended up outside our Humvees. Our guards were down, safe neighborhood, maybe a mile from where you all saw that statue fall down. And we're walking towards a tea stand. Someone knew we were coming. They'd left a 500-pound car bomb 10 feet from the tea stand. They were watching from an apartment block above with a remote-controlled trigger. Waited till we were all within about 20 feet. Detonated it, sending a wall of burning shrapnel through the entire patrol. Captain Funkhauser and his translator were killed instantly. So was my sound man. Paul fought to stay alive for almost an hour. It took him a long time to reach us with the emergency crews. Now, I was lying there on the ground, didn't know what was wrong with me. I'd lost most of my blood. I had shrapnel to the brain, both eardrums were blown out, both femurs were shattered, and there was burning shrapnel studded to my legs from my hips to my ankles. Now, they say your true nature is revealed at a time like this. I immediately started first asking questions, analyzing my situation, and then, a bit later, bossing my poor besieged rescuers around. If you call for help, you prove to your would-be rescuers that you have an airway and breathing, you're fine. They go to the quiet people, restart their heart, clear their airway. But I was able to lift my head. I saw that there was a burning car nearby and felt the burning. I thought, that's burning me, therefore I am in immediate danger. Therefore, I am allowed to call for help. I started calling for help. Medic Izzy Flores was walking by. It's his first combat casualty scene, mass casualty scene. He's doing his evaluation. He said, yeah, I remember I walked by you and you started talking to me. I said, oh yeah, she's good. And he went on to somebody else. So sure enough, my big mouth did get me into trouble. But one of the things that it did do was that I was later told I was the last person to receive medical aid. So I know that I did not live and others die because I got help first. And that comforts me every day. The other thing they tell me is that even in my delirium, as I lost my blood and went hypoxic, it means your brain starts losing oxygen, I kept asking about my guys. Where are Paul and James? And they said, you were asking about your guys like we were asking about our battle buddies. So that was one of the reasons we were fighting so hard to keep you alive. You were like us. You cared. So the next battle was recovery, a long, hard process, and most of it was mental. What I learned, again, you face that choice. You can respond with fear or you can respond with hope. Now, two of my caregivers represented that, like the opposite poles. My mom, fear. My dad, hope. My mom obsessed every day over what would be wrong with me for the rest of my life. Some bizarre things happen with blast injuries. Your bones overheal. My bones were overhealing with like flakes of coral-like bone that were going into my joints and fusing them. There was one way to fix this, otherwise they would fuse and I would walk like a peg leg the rest of my life. They had to pick up my legs and crank the knees and break the flakes of bone. Yes. They would have to give me extra painkiller beforehand, and it still hurt like hell. You'd scream through gritted teeth. We had to lock my mom in the waiting room behind 2 closed fire doors to allow this to take place. My dad, meanwhile, knew this had to be done, would stand next to me, hold my hand, and listen to me scream. And both of them are, absolute love, just different ways of expressing it. I came out of the other side of this with many things I never anticipated. The military used to be very suspicious when they saw me coming, especially working for CBS News, which most of them called the rather biased network. The fact that I'd risked my life again made many people look at my work again with a new eye. I looked back at my work too, and I saw the stories that I took such grief for from 2003 to 2006 were all pieces of the puzzle that became part of the success so far of the surge. You had to deal with both sides, providing people services and also providing them security. It's something we were doing only a patchwork of those first couple years. Many of the military commanders I'd worked with have now asked me back to explain both why it's important to be a critical member of the Fourth Estate. They've had me to talk to their young captains. The other thing they have me talk to their people about is what it's like to be injured and recover. I talk about getting out of the injured box. Now, once you're injured, everyone just remembers that you're broken. They don't remember that you're healed. They don't know how hard you fought to become whole again. They think of you as a victim, not as a survivor. Treat your people with the dignity they deserve once they've put themselves back together. I never thought when I began this journey that I would end up doing that. But if I look back at my internal compass, I was trying to speak out for those who couldn't. And that's what I ended up doing. Now, I never banked on being in Washington, D.C. covering national security. I still want to do what I used to do, covering my other homes of Jerusalem, Baghdad, Islamabad, or Kabul. But there's a far more famous Wellesley grad who's in that same boat, in a sense, who thought she'd have a different job right now. And I, like her, am still following my internal compass and doing what I can, where I am, to speak out for those who can't and to hopefully change history for the better. When I run into a wall, I ask myself what I'm doing this for and remind myself of my particular goals. And most of all, I set out to live every day with grace, honor, and a certain degree of stubbornness, hopeful stubbornness, but stubbornness in everything I do. And believe me, whether it's in the dirt in the aftermath of a bomb scene or in a hospital room or temporarily making coffee in an office before you take the place over. Well, all I can say is, if I can do it, I know all of you can. So congratulations, and good luck, and go get 'em.
Thank you, Kimberly. That's a powerful story, and it was